Okay, today's talk is about ancient Christian magic. And of course, my title says the interaction of belief and practice during the Roman Empire. It's pretty much what we'll be doing. Now, often when we think about magic or any activities related to ritual practices and utterances or material objects to affect nature in some way, we do not think about this system as typically within Christianity. Yet, ancient Christian magical papyri have been discovered throughout the Mediterranean, and we'll be going through these, especially in Egypt because of its perfect climate to preserve the papyrus or the parchment, revealing that many Christians did indeed combine their beliefs with a magical understanding of the world. Now, the reference to the idea of Christian magic may actually be alarming for many. In fact, one of my a dear close friend who has passed on, his name is Marvin Meyer, there's the two of us together, has often said in one of his works entitled Ancient Christian Magic, you can get this, there's a plug there. He says as follows about ancient Christian magic. I thought it would be appropriate for me to quote him as he was very important in my life and was part of my dissertation process. He was a mentor and a very close friend. He says this about Christian magic. He says, traditionalists may find heretical the use of Christian as a modifier for magic. But it's an apt combination for this gathering of previously untranslated curses, he's referring to his book, recipes and spells, as cast by the Egyptian Christians. He further notes in this context, in the Coptic language of the early Gnostics, the word for religion and magic have common roots. While the texts offered here are individually intriguing, especially those about sex and healing, he continues, their cumulative effect is that they demonstrate that Christianity can take the form, this is important, of a folk religion, making use of ritual power for all sorts of practical purposes. Marvin was very important to introducing, or I should say reintroducing the idea of Christian magic in ancient times to the world. He was on National Geographic, the History Channel. You may have seen him often before. He's connected, for example, the translation of such works as the Gospel of Thomas and the Gospel of Judas. That may, he worked with the Nag Hammadi codices. He's considered one of the top scholars of ancient Christianity. But still, people had no idea that there was this combination. And he used to go around the country and he had something called the Magic Show. And he went from university to university talking about Christian magic and reading from his book and other translations about, this interesting phenomenon, because it was indeed magic, right? It was indeed magic. Of course, we have to talk about definitions in a little bit. So let's continue. The New Testament, including the episode related to Simon Magus, as well as early Christian writings during the first centuries, reveal that many Christians did indeed integrate their religious faith with what we understand as magical practices, not perceiving any contradictions. In fact, many Christians and even Jews and pagans believe Jesus was a magician himself, according to primary sources from that time, sources that are written within the first 2 centuries of the life of the believed life of Jesus. To be sure, many early Christians were not able to discern the fundamental differences between what constitutes as magic and a miracle, or a prayer versus an invocation. As with many other beliefs at the time of the Roman Empire, Christianity amalgamated with other ancient systems of belief and practice. Now, I'm going to make this very clear right from the outset. And I wish I could say this like every 10 minutes or so throughout the whole entire talk. Otherwise, because there'll be misunderstandings. My goal is not to emphasize what is true or not true in a doctrinal sense. I'll say it again. My goal is not to emphasize what is true or not true in a doctrinal sense, for that is the job of a theologian. Okay. But my job is to tell you what people actually believed as revealed through the textual and archaeological evidence. For that is my job as the historian and scholar of religion and archaeology. Because some of you may hear things, oh, I just disagree. Can't believe he's saying that. I am reporting the news. Don't attack the newscaster, right? And people do that. People lack critical thinking skills to the point where if you say something, what people believed, they will immediately think, well, so you believe that. You must believe that because you're saying it. And that is a problem with logic that we have big time in the United States right now and throughout the world. We lack the ability of hearing a different point of view, even if it's espoused by somebody who not necessarily has that point of view. You're guilty just because you say it. And that drives me crazy. So just making it very clear, the rest of the talk, I'm only saying some things about Christianity that people actually believed. So let's not transmit this to me personally, because I am neutral ground. That's my job as a scholar. I'm going to facilitate the information and go from there, because you're going to hear some things that are pretty upsetting. And if you're not steeped in the idea that, hey, this is commentary and what people actually believed, it's going to be hard to get through this. If a person's not mature enough to be able to tell the difference, then please leave this talk now. Okay. Does that make sense? You got it? Because this is going to be interesting materials. Okay, here we go. Here we go. So what exactly is magic? Just dive right in, right? Now, probably maybe the best definition for magic in connection with studies related to the ancient Greeks and Romans arise from the very scholars who were intimately involved in that field of research. One would be, of course, the ancient historian H.S. Versno. And, this is the Oxford Classical Dictionary. This guy has credibility, okay? He says that magic is, quote, a manipulative strategy, he says that, to influence the course of nature by supernatural or occult means. I'm going to stop right there. Yes, he is he's connected to scholarship, but we have to be very careful with the word even manipulate in the English language. We've got to be very careful because you can see there's a bias even here amongst this particular scholar. For those people, many people don't see magic as manipulation per se. So we got to understand. But anyway, I'll keep going there. Furthermore, magic is essentially based on secret knowledge of sources of power. I can agree with that, but not necessarily always secret sources. Completely. So there's going to be some very public sources. Wow, I'm already loggerheads with Oxford. Okay, keep going. With the most important sources being utterances. Okay, I agree. Material objects and performance. I do agree with all those are involved in magic. There's another scholar, and I've met him before. We've had, I have his book, of course, but we've had a nice long conversation one time after a conference. And his name is Fritz Graf. I was very honored to meet him. And he talks about magic. He said the ancient word in Greek for magic, magia, and in Latin, magia. And he talks about how one is to investigate the background of this particular word, right? So as Ali says, magic is a mantra, yuntra, tantra. Yeah, that seems like a good connection. Thank you for that, right? But the problem is the word magic has this, it's actually an exotic Persian source. The word magic right? Groff notes magic as the art of magos, who is defined as a priest from the Persian perspective, an itinerant priest from the perception of Heraclitus of Ephesus, a wizard as observed in the plays of Sophocles, and only a sorcerer later on. He says two synonyms are directly related to the word magos in Greek. The first is agorts, translated as beggar priest, and the second is gos, which Groff states is a composite figure that combines ecstasy with ritual lament, healing, and divination, acting as an intermediary between the world of the gods and the worlds of men, and involved in sacrifices and initiations. By combining, he says, magos with the Greek agates and goats, the result is the word magic, and therefore it covers private mystery cults with their initiation rites, divination, and injurious black magic, all of which are alike in not belonging to the collective religion of the Greek polis. Okay, so I think Groff is coming a little bit closer to the definition where I'm kind of hovering around. So it is, but I want to go a little bit further. Now, you guys ever heard of Zoroastrianism? Yeah, it's a religion that's still active to this day. You guys know that the highest echelon, they're known as Magi? Yeah, you pretty well figured that out. Oh, you mean the ones that visited, yeah, you know, the story of visiting Jesus, of course, the Magi, those would be understood as priests of Zoroastrianism. Their practices were viewed by the Greeks and Romans as exotic, outside the box, right? So what they did then is magic. So you would ask a Greek or a Roman, are you doing magic? They'd be like, no, we're just doing ritual practices. You know, we're just doing what we do for our religion. It would be like some outsider taking a look at Christianity saying, well, what are you doing? Are you doing magic? Or, oh, no, we're doing prayer. Oh, well, it looks like magic from our, are you guys following this? So the word magos is understood as exotic. It's outside the box. And sometimes it's understood as a little taboo, right? It's a little, because they're not used to it. So that's the interesting part. So we got to be very careful about using these words in a modern context as applied to an ancient context. And you can see that problem right here. So let's just jump into this, right? So according to Fritz Groff, Plato himself summarizes the differences between religion and magic, in that magic makes every effort to persuade the gods, whereas the truly religious behavior is to leave the gods a free choice, for they know better than we do what is good for us. So you're going to have this idea where Plato is kind of moving us down that road a little bit, where the idea is you're just practicing your rituals or your beliefs if you're doing these activities in order to persuade or supplication or to ask of the gods, request, that's thurgi, right, later on, as opposed to demanding the gods to do things through your actions, and that automatically, if I do this, then this will happen and they will have to help me. Does that make sense? Are you guys getting that? So there's that divide of, well, you know, you could force the spirits or the gods to do your will. So it is a little bit more darker, magic-y kind of idea there. So, you know, so once again, we got to be very, very careful about these words. And I'm sorry, but we have to do this in order for us to get to the Christianity talk, right? So as noted by Groff, much of this dualistic understanding, while acknowledged and written about by ancient writers, is still based upon modern paradigms when applied comprehensively to prevalent views of antiquity. So to be honest, it's really difficult to get to what magic is in the ancient world. They're not going to completely understand you. They're going to just be thinking, well, what we do again is ritual. What they're doing is, ooh, it's kind of exotic. I don't understand it. Magic. Got it? And it could be subversive, and it may not be, but it's still outside what we're doing. And you ask them, are you practicing magic? They're, oh, no, we're not. but you're saying various words to cause something to happen. As long as they're saying those words where they believe that the God has a choice or the spirit has a choice, then they're not thinking that. They're thinking, oh no, we're just doing my belief. But if they start to think that they are doing that and forcing the spirits and the gods or demons to do it, then they are crossing that line and they're buying into the exotic context and will then apply or take that idea of magos as their own. Got it? You see how that works? They are systematically taking in that idea. They're buying into the exotica. Yeah, I'm doing the exotica. Does that happen? It does happen. It does happen at Ephesus in the worship of Artemis of the Ephesians. Absolutely. Where Artemis Ephesia, what happens is they will use the image of Artemis as a magical instrument to cause things to happen. That the Artemis extends to the image itself, and they can use this image in whatever way they want, and it's going to cause miraculous things to happen. And guess what? That's going to feed into, yes, that's going to feed into even Christian ideas of relics to automatically help without, are you guys getting this? But they're imbued with a certain power, and you're going, oh no, he's already made a connection. Yeah, I know, I have. But then again, it's all based upon the perception of the person using that magic, or perceived as not magic. I love how I was just straddling this line, be very careful here, right? So let's move on to another scholar, because we have, of course, Arthur Darby Noak. And he talks about the fact that there is this belief during the time of the Roman Empire that there is power behind the individual deities that can be accessed to. Power behind it. So he will say that there will be a shift from divine power rather than divine personalities, right? So many sought divine power in whatever form they could find it. This divine force was understood as standing behind many of the divine personalities, empowering them, but also relating them to one another, sometimes with one goddess or god taking on aspects of another. Greg Riley, Marvin Meyer, and many ancient scholars of religion have interpreted this movement as the stirrings towards monotheism. You have this one power behind these many faces. Because of this emphasis on divine power, composite deities became more commonplace. Serapis being one such example during the Hellenistic era, right? But even more frequently, already well-known deities acquired traits of others, sharing the same allocation of divine power, resulting in the Greek Zeus not only seen as the same as the Roman Jupiter, but also as the Egyptian Ammon, or the Phrygian Sabaoth, or the Etruscan Tinia, right? Or Semitic Baal shaman. Right? Isis too, right? Was declared as one and the same with sometimes with Aphrodite, Hera, and oh yes, of course, Artemis by her worshippers. She was even invocated along with these other names in inscriptions and magical works, right? Syncretism, yes. Still, the Egyptian goddess was pronounced by her venerators as the greatest and most supreme manifestation of them all. And you're thinking, why are you talking about this is Isis? You'll see where we're going. So Isis is a start. While Isis appeared to participate in the divine power of other deities, as Apulus notes, right? She was said to possess the real authentic name behind the mask. Such understandings are directly relevant then, because this moves over to Artemis Ephesia, Artemis of the Ephesians, who is also a product of this form of syncretism, mixing with her the goddesses Cybele and the Greek Artemis, Isis, Demeter, Hecate. She, like Isis, was viewed as supreme to them all, the greatest by all her worshippers. Where are we leading? We're seeing where we're going. When this belief is related to magical practices, the deity that accumulates some of the most names possess more divine power under her mantle. But then what will happen is, hey, we got this power name, this one power behind it. And you can see in Judaism, they'll say this power is God. In Christianity, they'll say this power is God. And there you have it. You see the connection? Yeah, so now all of a sudden you're moving into this magical view that this power behind the gods is this one God behind. And this is how Christians, early Christians, some of them will understand it. And when it comes to power names, you know, of course, obviously you have the Jewish power words, right? The names, right? I mean, Yahweh and others, right? And you can see these ideas will then transfer over to the point where ancient Christian magic will use the word Io, which is the form of Yahweh and Jehovah. Are you guys getting this? That we use it all the time, constantly in their spells, because this is a power word. This is a power name, and they use this to name over all kinds of other things in order to get their way. Manipulation, we're back to it. See how they see? So you're seeing these ideas as they build, as they grow, right? And of course, I have to talk about Judaism. I talked about this before. This is a quick review, but let's talk about Judaism because it does, Christianity's and the magical ideas does build on this. So yes, references to magic, all right, in the Hebrew Bible are quite vague for the most part. Exodus 22:18 says, do not allow a sorceress to live, is often mistranslated by the KJV as not permitting a witch to live. If the word used is kashep, which does not actually mean sorceress or a witch, while the root of the word can mean mutter or hum, as the hum of insects or the sound within the wind of trees, right? The compound word has the word kash, which means herb. And so the word actually means herb user. And yet there's more, because we know that the Greek Septuagint, the Jews translated, the Hebrew, the vague Hebrew into the specific Greek Septuagint, looks at this word as meaning poisoner. So the pharmacaria. So this means suffer not a poisoner to live. So that witch reference is not there. That's called modern revisionism, especially old King James I. He liked that one, but that's not even relevant for our studies. So when people think, oh, that's part of it, nope, gone, bye. Next. All right. So, but still, is the manipulation of herbs used for doing evil work, but it's not necessarily that. So Deuteronomy. Let's just go to Deuteronomy. Why not? Deuteronomy. There's a few things mentioned here. It says, there shall not be found amongst you anyone that makes his son or daughter to pass through the fire, use divination, a soothsayer, sometimes practiced as witchcraft, or an enchanter who interprets omens, or a sorcerer or a charmer, caster of spells, or one that consults a ghost, a medium, or a familiar spiritist, or a necromancer. Okay, so anyone who does these things is detestable to the Lord, and because of these detestable practices, the Lord your God will drive out the nations before you. Okay, we're going, okay, we got the English. Does it really say that? No. Oh, no. So the soothsayer is translated by some Bibles as practicing witchcraft, but the word relates to the hum of insects or the sound of the wind in the trees. You've heard this before, and refers also to the idea of automatically bringing power to the one who is invoking, as if the sound in and of itself can bring about the magical act. So it's a little different. As for enchanter, while it can mean to interpret omens, it literally refers to the murmur of obscure incantations, again, automatically calling up a divine power. But rather than the sound, the focus is upon the words themselves. The reference to sorcerer means one who cuts up, and can even mean to shred ingredients for a magical potion, or cutting himself as a way of getting the deity's attention. More likely the latter. So the idea of you're cutting yourself, you're bleeding yourself to get the attention. For the reference to the charmer, or one who casts spells, the word refers to divination without divine guidance, and so trying to learn fate via mechanical means. As for medium, it can mean to talk with a different voice, and corresponds to Septuagint, the idea of a form of necromantic ventriloquism. And so the idea is, you go, sum this up, Dr. Rayfield. I will right now. So the idea is focused upon ritual acts that do not involve God and are believed to work automatically. I'll say it one more time. The focus is upon ritual acts that do not involve God and are believed to work automatically. But what if you're doing ritual acts that involve God? Then it's okay. It is? Uh-huh. Where does it say that? Everywhere? Give me everywhere. I will. Let's start. Are you guys getting this? So as long as you're involving the deity in this process, you're good. You're not practicing bad magic. You're doing good stuff here. Okay, so let's Joseph. You guys ever heard of him? Technicolor Dreamcoat? Yeah, him. Yeah. Joseph plants a silver drinking cup in Benjamin's pouch to use as an excuse to call them back, when they were visiting. You do know that what happens is he accuses them of stealing his cup. But the interesting thing is that this cup, what is it used for, right? So what it's used for, it is for drinking, but it says also, and the master uses it for divination. What? Wait, Joseph is using a cup, the silver cup, for divination? Yeah, is that magic? Well, according, if we go back, it's okay magic because he's involving God maybe, right? But it is divination. I'm sorry, there's no other way of translating this. Now remember, my father was one of the translators of the New American Standard Bible, which is the third largest Bible in the English-speaking world. I grew up knowing all this. It's like, yeah, it is. There's no way of reading this around, but I think it's kind of fun in and of itself. Okay, let's keep going. Numbers 5:12-31 describes a ritual performed by a priest to decipher whether a woman committed adultery or not. And it goes on. I'll just read part of it. I don't want to read the whole thing. Then he shall take some holy water in a clay jar and put some dust from the tabernacle floor into the water. And then, of course, she and her husband would go with an offering of barley meal to the tabernacle. The priest would make a drink consisting of holy water and sweeping from the tabernacle floor. They would drink it and have an effect. Does that make sense? That seems pretty magical to me. It certainly does, right? Yeah, but then again, it's done with the authority of God, so it's okay. But it's still believed to automatically work. So you see how it's really on that edge there, on the cusp of, ooh. And if you are a learned theologian, you'll automatically say it's God. If you are a layperson and are hearing this, you're going to think this is like magic, right? How are you going to know the difference if you're a commoner, right? Not specially trained. Not all of us are trained theologians and scholars of religion, all right? And so this is going to happen later on with Christianity. They're going to, well, it sounds the same. It looks like a duck, quacks like a duck. It must be a duck, right? And that's the perception of what happens. So, there it is. Yeah. So I'm reading one of the comments. It's pretty funny. I'll mention it later. But yeah, no, it's great. So further, many physical objects mentioned in the Hebrew Bible appear to be used magically, like the Urim and Thummim, right? These are two objects mentioned in Numbers 27:21 and 1 Samuel 28:6. They were devices that the high priest consulted to determine the will of God. These are devices used to determine the will of God. I can go on and on about this, but in and of itself, you can see whether it's true or not, the perception is this will be understood as magical later on. See how that works? I'm not saying I believe this or not. I'm saying this is what people did believe. And that interpretation would continue. And of course, obviously the casting of lots. The Hebrew Bible even talks about the power of curses. And I'm not sure how much God would be behind, like when the prophet Elisha on his way to Bethel, right? Some small boys came out of the city and made fun of him because he had a lack of hair, and they called him Baldy, right? In response, Elisha cursed the children in the name of God. And then two bears, apparently prompted by God, came out of the forest and tore 42 of the boys to shreds. So you do have these interesting ideas. So, there you have it, right? Oh, somebody wants me to keep going, talking about the magical stuff of the Hebrews. Okay, so so we do have um, Daniel. Let's talk about Daniel. Daniel was the prophet. He was employed for many years in Babylon as he's the chief occultist of the city, right? By the way, we're entering into an interesting realm because the area of Babylon, slowly but surely, another belief system will be coming in. Well, and of course, Persia, there'll be Zoroastrianism, right? So you'll have the idea of magic coming in. And, the question is when the book of Daniel is being written, right? Most scholars believe is written during not the Neo-Babylonian phase, but during the Persian Melu, right? Where Zoroastrianism is prominent. So just throwing that one out there. Well, in fact, he says Daniel was a supervisor of, quote, the magicians, astrologers, Chaldeans, and soothsayers. Okay, so he's in charge, right? Because the references to magical practices per se were not directly forbidden, especially if the Hebrew Bible is interpreted via the Septuagint, there is overwhelming evidence that Jews during the late Second Temple period, all the way into the 3rd, 4th, and 5th century CE, practiced magic, with many Jewish magicians moving through various communities. And I will continue and say that still continues to this day. Ancient Jewish magic becomes medieval Jewish magic, which goes into modern Jewish magic. It still continues today. Of course, one of the most famous Jewish miracle workers was Honi HaMegiel from the 1st century. He had a penchant for standing within a circle while he called down rain from heaven. He was known as the circle drawer. One time, he drew a circle in dust, stood inside it, and informed God that he would not move until it rained. When it began to drizzle, Honi told God that he was not satisfied and expected more rain. It then began to pour. He explained that he wanted a calm rain, at which point the rain calmed to a normal rain. He was almost put into what's called cherem, an excommunication, for this incident, since he seemed to show dishonor to God. However, Shimon ben Shettach excused him, saying that he had a special relationship with God, that he could talk to God this way, right? So, after all, didn't Abraham barter with God? Oh yeah, remember that? When it came over Sodom and Gomorrah. Are you guys following me? Is this interesting? So yeah, so you can have that bartering relationship. So it's okay. He can make his magic circle and demand God give rain, and it's a special relationship. Okay, so we move on to the Testament of Solomon, dating from the 1st to the 3rd century CE, referring to various magical practices. Of course, in this story, King Solomon discovers a demon draining the soul out of a boy who was inspiring his artisans as they were trying to rebuild the Temple of Jerusalem. Praying to God for help, Solomon receives a magic ring, right? With the seal of God from the archangel Michael, having the power to force demons to do his bidding. And being, of course, as resourceful as he is, Solomon proceeds to really compel demons to build the temple using this ring. So yeah, there's lots here. Now, when it comes to Jewish magical papyri, they are everywhere to be found. And there's so many of them, metal amulets and just common ones on papyrus. Now, one of the most pronounced Jewish exorcists was the famous Eliezer, who once exorcised demons before the Roman Emperor Vespasian himself, exorcising, not exercising, like, 1, 2, 1, 2, do 10 push-ups, okay? No. So you have him as and he also called upon the name of Solomon. Jewish spells often mixed with pagan elements. There's one spell in the Greek magical papyri, which, by the way, if you could ever get a hold of this, I highly recommend this book. It is amazing, and it's filled with these ancient papyri, including this one. So get this one and get the Christian magic one, and you'll have a nice complete picture because these are just primary sources. So as opposed to getting lengthy commentary, you're getting the spells itself, which dispels those misunderstandings. So, and somebody said, which edition is this? This is the one edited by Hans Dieter Betz, and we had to have this at Claremont. So, BETZ. So, all right. Now, so I'll just read one of them. Hail, Osiris, king of the underworld, lord of embalming, who is the source of thinness, who gives answers to Abydos, who is under the Nob tree in Meroe, who glory in the Pasham. Hail, Alethbot, bring Sabaoth, what, to me? Hail, Athenai, great Eso, the valiant, bring Michael unto me, the mighty angel who is with God. That seems like you see, it's all there, right? You got Egyptians, you got of course Yahweh being called to, and also you have Michael being called to. You also have what's called the Nippur bowls. These are examples of Jewish incantation texts. Of the 40 bowls that were excavated, 26 mention the figure of Lilith, by the way. So Lilith is very important when it comes to these magical practices. It appears that Lilith was regarded as the ghostly paramour of men, a constitute of special danger for women during many periods of their sexual life cycle. So she's used as protection. These ritual bowls are used to fight against her for protection. So I have more on that, but we can talk about that later. So good stuff. The Talmud, right, refers to magical practices. This is an overarching term for the Mishnah, compiled around 230 CE, and of course the Gemara from around 500. The Talmud encompasses specific teachings involving demonology and legends and myths. In fact, the Talmud says, if the eye could perceive the demons that people the universe, existence would be impossible. The demons are more numerous than we are. They surround us on all sides like trenches dug round vineyards. Every one of us has 1,000 on his left hand and 10,000 on his right. The discomfort endured by those who attend rabbinical conferences comes from the demons mingling with men in these circumstances. Besides, the fatigue one feels in one's knees in the walking comes from the demons that one knocks up against at every step. If the clothing of the rabbis wear out so quickly, it is again because the demons rub against them. Whoever wants to convince himself of their presence has only to surround his bed with sifted cinders, and the next morning he will see the imprints of cock's feet. So, okay, so demons are everywhere. We see that, right? That's a lot of demons. Maybe in the morning you feel really tired and sluggish, you can't move. It's the demons all pressing against you. Watch out. But the Talmud, what it does is you got to do something to be able to see these demons. So the same treatise goes on that you maybe need to be burning portions of a black cat. I'm sorry, that's pretty upsetting. Or placing the ashes in one's eye. And then at once it says one perceives the demons. The Talmud also explains that devils inhabit water spouts on houses and are fond of drinking out of water jugs. Therefore, it's advisable to pour a little water out of a jug before drinking, so as to get rid of those unclean parts where the demons have drunk. Another section of the Babylonian Talmud provides these warnings about demons and says, on coming from a privy or outdoor toilet, a man should not have sexual intercourse till he has waited long enough to walk half a mile, because the demon of the privy is with him for the time. If he does, his children will be epileptic. So basically, if you have to go to the restroom, walk away. I guess this is something to support the idea of having outhouses, right? Keep it along there because demons. I understand that. Some people may have a little bit more demons in their bathroom than others. Watch out for them following you out. So scary, right? And of course, there's even things to heal a person's flesh, one should take dust that lies within the shadow of an outdoor toilet, mix with honey and eat it. I'm not sure if I want to do that. I mean, we just talked about demons, falling out of the restroom. Now you're supposed to, I don't know, take soil from outside the outdoor toilet, mix with honey and eat it. Well, whatever. That's from the Gittin 69:8, if you're wanting to know the exact reference. There's even what was understood as the preserving stone, which was believed to prevent miscarriage. So yeah, you got magic everywhere. So let's move on. We're to Jesus. So Jesus was considered to be, by many, to be a magician. If an observer did not believe Jesus was the Son of God and working his miracles via God the Father, it would be difficult for many not to interpret Jesus as a magician, for he acts in ways that would be perceived as manipulating nature from an outsider perspective. For example, the calming of the storm, right? How about, the casting out of demons using certain words and phrases? I mean, right? Or how about raising the dead? Isn't that necromancy, right? Or curing people of diseases with a mere touch, and even using physical objects to transmit his power. Where does that happen? An example is found in John chapter 9, 6 and 7. After saying this, he, being Jesus, spit on the ground, made some mud with the saliva, and put it on the man's eyes. Go, he told him, wash in the pool of Siloam. So the man went and washed and came home seeing. Now you're going, yeah, but that's Christianity. They believed in Jesus. Well, you read that passage to somebody who is not a Christian, who is not a theologian, it seems like the material infused by his Spirit did the healing. Are you following that? Just the reality. So there are lots of things that enable many to say, well, if the power of God can infuse something that's material and work automatically, well, that could mean a lot of possibilities. And that will lead, again, to Christian beliefs going, well, yeah, so this item connected with the saint or this object or this cross or whatever it is empowered by a special dispensation given by maybe a priest or somebody to work automatically. But if it's working automatically, where is God in this, right? So you can see where it's going to drive theologians crazy and everybody else. Okay, let's move. According to many within the Jewish community, from the 1st century on, Jesus was a great magician, said to be a deceiver of many people of Israel. Specifically, he's understood as a magician. In the Mishnah, for example, the 4th tractate of the 4th set of a 6 series, by the way, which was first gathered in the 2nd century CE, asserted on the eve of the Passover, Yeshua, Jesus, was hanged. For 40 days before the execution took place, a herald went forth and cried, he is going forth to be stoned because he has practiced sorcery and enticed Israel to apostasy. Okay, so there's the magical part. How about, and that's from the Sanhedrin 43a. How about the Talmud, compiled in the 6th century, also states, the teacher said Yeshua practiced sorcery and corrupted and missold Israel. Now, the earliest extant sources for this accusation by Jewish leaders is actually found in the Gospels themselves. The Gospels themselves. So people, I can't believe that people believe that. Have you read your New Testament? It's like, no, well, there it is, But once again, this is about what people believed. Even the New Testament admits it. So here it goes. So, for example, the reference to Jesus as an evildoer, and we just see that word as evildoer in English, right? Mentioned in John 18:30. It uses the Greek word kakopoios, a term mentioned in the context that we know from lexicons within a magical context. You look at a Greek lexicon, it's that word, evildoer, is somebody who does evil works, actually doing things in a ritual sense for evil, as understood as magical, which can be interpreted as exotica, magos. Are you guys getting that? That's the understanding of this word. In fact, it's even used in the Codex of Justinian, and it refers to the Chaldeans and magicians and the rest whom people call men who are doing evil. They're using, of course, now the Latin word, which of course is malefici, evildoers. Remember the hammer of, okay, are you guys getting this? Are you following? So it goes into Latin. So it is understood as doing evil magic, bad magic. So in the New Testament, they're accusing Jesus of doing bad magic, right? Now, of course, you're going to see also the word planos in Matthew 27:62, translated as deceiver. Once again, don't be deceived by the English. This, of course, deceiver is understood to be related to magicians, somebody who deceives, who plays tricks. For example, Justin Martyr, who is one of the early Christian apologists, and of course, one of the early church fathers, who is recognized as Orthodox by the Catholic Church. In his Dialogue of Trifle, tells how the Jews referred to Jesus as both a magician, using the word magos, and a deceiver, planos, of the people. Chapter 69, verse 7. While they also refer to Paul as a sorcerer and a deceiver. This is found in the Acts of Peter. The idea of deception is to trick, to show things that are really not there. An idea that is really connected to magic, for magic is often illusionary and deceptive by nature. So it's actually in the New Testament and understood by the early church fathers, and then later the church, even up to Justinian, as this is what it means. Now, by the middle of the 2nd century, the pagan anti-Christian apologist Celsus, right, proclaimed with confidence it was by magic that he, Jesus, was able to do miracles. Now it's interesting. Celsus lived again in the 2nd century, 100 years after the time of Jesus, and his works are preserved by Origen of Alexandria, a very famous Christian, a theologian, in the first part of the 3rd century. So this is an interesting source, and I'll go ahead and read it. What happens is that, in fact, here it goes. Celsus believed Jesus acquired his magical skills while in Egypt, stating, quote, after she, Mary, now remember, this is a source that comes from within 100 years of the lifetime of Jesus. So just 100, 150 years. So it's pretty early. So we're dealing with not what is true or could be true, but we're dealing with what people believed. We can tell the difference. I can see people going, see, he said this. It's like, I'm reading what they wrote and what they believed at that time. Okay, after she, Mary, had been driven out by her husband, and while she was wandering about in a disgraceful way, she secretly gave birth to Jesus. Because he was poor, he, Jesus, hired himself out as a workman in Egypt, and there tried his hand at certain magical powers on which the Egyptians pride themselves. He returned full of conceit because of these powers, and on account of them gave himself the title of God. Right? According to Celsus, because magic convinced only the most simple-minded, Jesus, quote, won over only 10 sailors and tax collectors of the most abominable nature. And as far as the followers are concerned, he was only able to convince, he says, wool workers, cobblers, laundry workers, and the most illiterate of bucolic yokels, unquote. As you see here, to Celsus, the magic of Jesus was partly charms and partly parlor tricks, illusions created to foster faith amongst the masses, but actions that were considered too transparent and obvious for those who are as well educated as Celsus himself. Yeah, you're going, whoa, well, guess what? I'm telling you what people actually believed. Now you're thinking, well, they're the opposers. Well, guess what? Once again, you have Christians who believe the same thing, right? That's the reality. In the 3rd century, the pagan Neoplatonist Heracles compared Jesus with the famous 1st century sage Apollonius of Tyana, who was also known for performing great acts of power, and saw them in a similar light. He says, in their anxiety to exalt Jesus, they run up and down prating of how he made the blind to see and worked certain other miracles of the kind. Let us take note, however, much better and more sensible is the view which we take of such matters, and explain the conception which we entertain of men gifted with remarkable powers. But in the time of our own ancestors, during the reign of Nero, there flourished Apollonius of Tyana, who from mere boyhood, when he was a priest from Agge in Cilicia of Asclepius, the lover of mankind, worked any number of miracles, of which I will omit the greater number and only mention a few. So it's like, well, there's other people who do these kind of things as well, right? So you have to understand that. Now, what then is my reasons for mentioning these facts? It was an order. That you may be able to contrast our own accurate and well-established judgment on each point with the easy credulity of the Christians. And what he will go on to say is that Apollonius said that he practiced these acts on behalf of the gods, but he said with Christians, they have Jesus saying he's practicing these acts as God. And so there's a question when it comes to why he is doing that, right? Why is he acting as God? Which in many ways you'll see magicians doing that, being possessed by the spirit, and then doing magical practices as being the god. So, yes. So there you have it. But so anyway, of course, early Christians were familiar with these claims, and Justin Martyr in the Dialogue of Trifle referred to the common Jewish perceptions of Jesus, stating, "For they dared to call him a magician, magos, and a deceiver of the people." In the Pseudo-Clementine recognitions from the 2nd into the 3rd centuries, these Christian works depict Jewish scribes shouting out to the Christians, the signs and the miracles which Jesus wrought, he wrought not as a prophet, but as a magician. In the Acts of Pilate, dating between 150 to 255, the Jewish people are portrayed as stating that by using magic, Jesus, does these things, and by having the demons by his side. So you have a lot of this, a lot of sources. So, it's important to understand that. Okay. Even as late as the 4th century, Christians were busy counteracting claims that their founder was actually a great magician. With these defenders, including Lactantius and Arnobius, with the latter referring to how many Jews believed Jesus actually stole the magical names of the angels of might directly from the Egyptian temples. Later on, this story, popular within the Jewish community, found its way into the medieval work known as the Toldoth Yeshua, where Jesus is portrayed as stealing the ineffable name of God from the Jewish temple, rather than an Egyptian temple. According to the story, Jesus finds the divine name of God, the name that should never be pronounced, in the temple, writes it down upon a parchment, and then places it into a cut in his leg so he can pass it out of the holy structure with a name undedicated upon his person. Removing the parchment with the name from his leg, Jesus proceeds to use this divine power word for his own purposes, performing many magical acts such as healing lepers and bringing the dead man back to life. Because of his powers, people began to worship him as Messiah. So you're going to see this a lot in popular Jewish lore, right? So, so there you have it. So it is very, very popular. You see this quite a bit. Now, I see here a context comment here, and I will address it here. Pilgrim says, so these Talmudic comments and excerpts of the Mishnah need to be considered in context. Absolutely. There were many different opinions written down, not at all unanimous. Right. And this is what I'm saying. This is all about perception and what people believed. Also, there seems to be a reaction against a figure that was executed by Imperial Rome. the empire murdered Jewish communities, so many leaders within persecuted communities felt the need to distance themselves from executed members of their communities. That's absolutely true. There was a context in mind, right? There is this need that Jesus was viewed as a traitor. He was viewed. I mean, think about it. Jesus. We could go on this one. This is really good. But Jesus, what did he do? He was looked at as the Son of God. He was looked at, and of course, the emperor was understood as the Son of God. He's looked at as Savior. Well, the emperor was looked at as a Savior. So you see this problem, this competition with the imperial cult. And yeah, he was executed by Pontius Pilate, right? For claiming to be a Messiah. So absolutely, yes, correct, Pilgrim. Very good comments. These are politically and theologically charged writings. You can tell in the placement of Jesus in relation to Egypt. They do not represent Jewish beliefs as a whole, but rather statements of public relation, if you will. Yes, it is. It is a reaction. And these reactions will be used in many different contexts, right? And of course, you can see with Christianity. All Jesus' immediate and then earlier followers were Jews. Absolutely. Once again, this is part of that polemic, this divide between Judaism and Christianity. Absolutely. Again, agree. So, and of course, obviously, you mentioned John Dominic Crossan's work. I agree too. I'm actually a friend of John Dominic Crossan. Woohoo! Read quite a bit of those. Awesome. Anyway, good comments by Pilgrim. I just wanted to address that. Okay, concerning, now let's keep on going. Jesus as a magician. Let's talk about somebody else who knows or used to know Dominic Crossan, but has passed away. But Morton Smith, I'm not sure if you're familiar with him. He says, if a magician could call up and get control of or identify himself with such a spirit, he could then control inferior spirits or powers. And so what's going to happen is this misunderstanding of what Jesus does in connection to John the Baptist. Many will believe that the spirit of John the Baptist, because he was executed, then entered into Jesus and he was acting as John the Baptist. He was possessed by the spirit of John the Baptist. And you can see this is through invocations. So Mark chapter 6, verse 14 can be read in an interesting way. John the Baptist has been raised from the dead. And many will read this as by Jesus and his necromancy. Jesus now has him. And there, since John can control them, the inferior powers work their wonders by him, that is, by his orders. So you have this idea that it can be read in the Greek or misread by the Greek, but here the problem is translation. It can be read both ways, that, well, maybe the power of Jesus is actually the power of John the Baptist, and he made it come through him. You see the misunderstandings. Now, remember, people are going to be reading the Gospel of Mark to these various people, and they're going to interpret those words differently. Not that this ever happens today. Dramatic pause, by the way. Right? People will hear these words, and they'll hear different things, right? Now, there is another controversy. October 2008, right? There was a discovery, a so-called discovery, by archaeologists of a ceramic bowl off the Egyptian coast of Alexandria, right? It bears an inscription that basically says the cup is from by Christ the magician. But people are saying, well, this is an early inscription that declares that that Jesus was a magician. However, it can be read in different ways. It could also be read not as Christos, but Christos, meaning kind, loving, and good and merciful. So you got to watch that epsilon. Is it epsilon? Is it iota? So, but it could be. It could be. So scholars, let them debate amongst themselves. I guess I'll debate amongst myself too. Another magician closely associated with the Bible and found in the Acts of the Apostles is Simon Magus. Here we go. Whew. Okay. Now, the earliest Christian Gnostic movement is connected with Simon Magus. He is the magician that's mentioned in the Acts of the Apostles who wished to buy the power of the Holy Spirit to heal people, giving rise to the word simony, right? Connected to the idea of buying church offices, right? Anyway, so Acts 8:9-11 says, this Simon then, who feigned faith, supposing that the apostles themselves performed their cures by the art of magic and not by the power of God. Oh, well, wait, we're finding, you mean stuff in the New Testament that supports what I'm saying? I'm telling you, people say, oh, I can't believe that people perceive these things as magic. Hello, Simon Magus in the Acts of the Apostles is thinking that. Surely others were thinking the same thing. And hello, the Jews within the New Testament are thinking that. This should be no mystery, right? That ideas of Christianity connect to these. So Simon Magus, he attempted, of course, to buy the power of the Holy Spirit. He became the quintessential example of a person who practiced magic as opposed to a miracle. I mean, we can talk, we can debate about what is magic and what is a miracle forever, right? But just what is it, right? I'll do that later. But Simon Magus is later portrayed in the Acts of Peter, fighting off the Apostle Peter with the powers of the miracle, revealed as always triumphing over the power of magic. Of course, the idea is the miracle is done with permission, with allowance of the power of God, while the magic is perceived in this context as you're forcing some agency of doing this, whether it be demonic, usually demonic, or otherwise. You're forcing it, you're making it happen. Although maybe the demons are going, yeah, well, we want this to happen. I don't know. Anyway, are you guys getting that? So that's the idea, but it really is a slippery slope. It really is. So Irenaeus accredits Simon Magus, as I said, as the first Christian Gnostic. And of course, his story is interesting. Simon taught that God's first thought manifested as Anea or Sophia, which was the feminine aspect of himself, and that this female first thought descended down into the pleroma to create the angels, but the angels rebelled and captured this female spirit and encased it within human flesh. And then the Sophia was going through various reincarnations. At first, she's doing pretty well. She's Helen of Troy. But after a few reincarnations, she ends up being a common prostitute in the city of Tyre, where Simon Magus arrives and recognizes her and says, hey, I recognize you. You're Sophia. And so he frees her from slavery, and they go around teaching their beliefs. Now, what is interesting, though, is that originally it said that Simon Magus was a disciple of John the Baptist. Interesting. And it is also interesting that that he claims to be empowered or brings upon a spirit upon him in order for him to practice his magic, his ways. And so I'm going to go ahead and read this here. So what happens is, here it is, accordingly, dropping pages, especially as he performs many marvels, so that if we did not know that he does these things by magic, we ourselves should also have been deceived. Okay, so there you have it, right? According to Justin Martyr. Now, Simon, of course, went about doing many miracles that fooled the people into believing he was who he said he was, including making statues come to life, walking through solid rock, jumping off mountains uninjured, standing in the middle of flames and not burning, and giving life to trees, right? The recollections say, I shall change myself into a sheep or a goat. I shall make a beard to grow upon little boys. Ooh, I don't want that to happen. Okay. Kids grow up too fast anyway. I shall ascend by flight of the air. I shall exhibit abundance of gold. I shall make the unmaking kings. Well, why is this important to talk about Simon Magus? Well, what will happen is Simon Magus is depicted as conflicting with Peter. Peter is viewed as very much connected to Jewish Christianity. Okay. Now, what they will do is they'll start using Simon Magus as the cipher for the Apostle Paul. Because Apostle Paul was a Gentile and an outsider, and they'll use that term as an outsider in different ways. Even though he himself is Jewish, he was not part of the original 12. Of course, Judas is like, hey, okay, well, anyway, he was replaced. Okay, is that making sense? So he is understood as adding more to it. But what made many of the Jewish Christians uncomfortable, and understandably so, is that what will happen is that Paul will claim that Jesus is in him. Now, that seems okay for us in English, but what will happen is Simon Magus claimed that the power of God was within him. And so it gets to be a slippery slope. Okay, so here we go. So Pauline traditions is often interpreted, however, as against magic. For Galatians 5:20-21 says idolatry, what could be understood as pharmakon, poisoner, hatred, variance, emulations, wrath, strife, seditions, heresies, envying, murdering. He gives a list of these things. But again, the word is pharmakia. It's not witchcraft, which is the same root as the word pharmacy, but basically poisoner. But Paul is oftentimes understood as a magician himself. That's right, because he is claimed, again, I'm expressing the opinions of people at that time. I know people are, I can't believe this. People believe this. They claim, because he claimed to be possessed by or identified with the spirit of an executed criminal, and to do whatever he did by the power of this indwelling spirit. From an outsider who does not understand Christian theology, this is what a magician oftentimes does, right? So what will happen is when Paul says in Galatians 2:20, I live no longer I, but Christ lives in me, or he says, I dare speak of nothing save those things which Christ has done through me by word and deed, by the power and signs and miracles, by the power of his spirit to make the Gentiles obedient. People are going to hear this as magical. I mean, again, if you're from a Christian perspective, it's not saying that it's magical, but can you understand where that perception takes place? He wrote in the Corinthians about a number of their churches that being absent in the body, but present in spirit, he says, I have already judged the offender, uniting you and my spirit with the flesh, so the spirit and the power of our God, to give this fellow over to Satan for the destruction of his flesh. If Paul thus proves the possibility of ancient belief in such a relationship as that supposed to have existed between Jesus and the spirit of John the Baptist, it also provides the strongest evidence that this was not, in fact, the source of Jesus's power. So, wow. I mean, there's quite a bit here. I mean, there's a lot here. Okay, so you can understand where these misperceptions come about. Naturally, this moves us on, and we are moving on to the Acts of the Apostles. According to this narrative, as the message of the kingdom of God traveled throughout the city of Ephesus, Paul performed extraordinary miracles to the point where the Ephesians believed that the apostle himself was energized by a healing power, so that handkerchiefs or aprons were even carried from his body to the sick, wherein the diseases left them and the evil spirits went out. Are you seeing this? Right? This reminds me of the Jesus miracle in connection with the mud, right? But Paul's not always perceiving what's happening, right? Where Jesus, he's thinking about it happening within the context of Acts, they're just simply taken away from him and it's automatically healing. You see where this is interesting? And you can see where early Christians and medieval theologians will go, ooh, this is good. This works with relics, right? See these connections. So there is a theological basis for that. But for many of us, we would consider this magical. So again, it's a slippery slope. So let's keep going. So wishing to market upon Paul's supernatural success, 7 sons of one Sceva, a Jewish chief priest, began to pronounce over the evil spirits the name of the Lord Jesus, saying, I adjure you by Jesus whom Paul preaches. So he's using that power name. Remember we talked about power words, right, before? Yahweh, and before that. Of course, you also had Isis, Artemis of the Ephesians, right? These are, like not only the power, but the actual name to unlock that power. So the 7 sons of Sceva are going this. The tactic, of course, failed miserably. Well, one of the evil spirits answered, I recognize Jesus and I know about Paul, but who are you? At this point, the evil spirit leaped on them and subdued all of them and overpowered them so that they fled out of that house naked and wounded. As a result of this supernatural occurrence relating to this exorcism brought about by the magic words of Paul, right? Because once again, wouldn't they perceive Jesus as a magic word? Of course they would, and they did, right? A great fear fell upon them all, described as both Jews and Greeks who lived in Ephesus, and immediately it says they began confessing and disclosing their practices, and those who practiced magic brought their books together and began burning them in the sight of all, and they counted up the price of them and found it to be 50,000 pieces of silver. So, I mean, this is pretty well a conversation directly connected with magic, just slightly, right? So how do we unpack this, right? Now, let's go through this. Now, let's go back to the clothing. The fact that the Ephesians depicted in the narrative believe the articles of clothing connected to the Apostle Paul were likewise invested with a special thaumaturgical powers, was consistent with views widespread in antiquity. So the Gospels, healing occurs when people touch the hem of Jesus' garment. Remember this? Well, in the Acts, people are healed by contact with Peter's shadow. Remember Peter's shadow? Peter walks around and see his shadow. They're cured because they're in his shadow. This power described as flowing through Paul's hands and even emanating from his clothes because they were touching his skin. The word used for handkerchief, sandaria, is used in both Greek and Latin, and it was literally used for wiping off sweat. An article of clothing which really definitely had contact with the skin. As for the word translates, can be aprons, right? They were typically worn by artisans in their work, which fits Paul's description as a tent maker, and again would be directly upon his skin. The author's making the point that the power was literally coming from his body as charged with the power of God, because both words are plural, and keeping this in mind, that is highly unlikely Paul walked about Ephesus wearing multiple handkerchiefs and aprons. This evidence suggests that maybe this happened over a period of time. Can you see that? Otherwise, it's like, here's another one. Here's another one. Oh, I have another one here. He's not wearing all these sweat things for people to take. Many translators will establish that God was performing extraordinary miracles by the hands of Paul, but the word dunamis is a feminine noun meaning power or strength. And while this power is described as being extraordinary, the qualification between miracle, power, or magic is really up to the observer and the interpreter. For the Ephesians would have seen this as an unusual manifestation of power that may not necessarily conform to the definition of miracle, and we cannot be certain about the author's original intention either. Also, while the passage conveys the sense that the clothing acts as an extension of the apostles' power as transmitted through God, the point of departure with some of the other similar references in the Gospels is that these handkerchiefs and aprons were actually removed from his body and yet continued to be charged, so to speak, with the healing energy apart from his presence. There we go. We've moved into early Christians can go, okay, we can use it. We can have this magical understanding. Is this making sense? It's found there, right? it's from God, but there's this idea of it automatically working. Whew, how are we doing? Right? Okay. While the author of Acts still makes certain his audience recognizes that it is the power of God that is working through Paul's hand, there's no question that the apostle is depicted as a great healer and exorcist having more power than these others. So it's kind of it is a contest. It is a contest between him and these Jewish exorcists. And Jewish exorcists were popular in ancient times. One of the most pronounced Jewish exorcists was the famous Eliezer, who once exorcised demons before the Roman Emperor Vespasian, reciting incantations inclusive of calling upon the magical names of Solomon. So this is common knowledge, as other sources do as well. Of course, according to Acts, the failure of the Jewish exorcists to use Paul's magical words led to the demonic attack, triggering an intense fear amongst all the Jews and Greeks. And this resulted in those who practiced magic to bring their books together and they burning them in the sight of all. The word perigeros, translated as magic here, is an adjective often applied to magical acts, but in a negative sense, having the sense of acting in a curious, even meddling manner. Aren't you glad I'm going through the Greek? So it's basically not just magic, it's meddling magic. It's magic where you're getting in other people's business, right? So it's a certain kind of magic. Don't you love Greek? I wish we could, put an asterisk every time there's a qualification in the Bible for something. But then again, it'll be like probably every other word would be an asterisk, and the content notes would be like all the way up the page. But there you have it. I know we have study Bibles, so I'm talking about easy reading for lay people. So there you have it. Now, the idea that Paul could use the name of the Lord Jesus to heal people and cast out the evil spirits, with the additional evidence that he possessed the power of the holy man that extended to his clothing, while in contrast, those of the Jewish kindred known as specialists in exorcism could not, result in the Ephesians viewing him as having an exclusive power that only he could effectively tap, making their conventional ways not only obsolete, but potentially dangerous. And so according, they burned their books. Maybe worth about 50,000 pieces of silver, quite a bit. There is also evidence, although I won't go into because I want to keep on going, that there's evidence that the word means that many of these people who are burning the books are actually already believers, which gets even more interesting. But I'll bring that up later. We'll break down the Greek another time. Now, we move into the first century church manual known as the Didache, the teaching. It states that thou shalt not do no murder, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not corrupt boys, thou shalt not commit fornication, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not deal in magic, thou shalt not do sorcery. Of course, this is our English translation. This is the early first century church manual. The verb translated as the act of doing sorcery is pharmakeon, which literally means to giving drugs or poisons. So basically it says no doing poisons. We already talked about the word for magic. Magios refers to exotic magic. So even though we're reading this and we see this as related to magic, ancient people will be reading this. They're going, yeah, they're talking about doing evil magic. We don't do evil magic. We do good magic. You got it? So for the Didache, this doesn't apply. Although for modern readers who see the word magic, it does apply. Let's keep going. For Justin Martyr, who performed those for him, he says, he's an early church writer, those who perform magic when converted no longer did so. Now, I think this is a fascinating one. You're going to love this one. So his belief is, I'll read this and you'll love this. So he said, those who once made use of magical arts have dedicated themselves to the good and unbegotten God. So he believes that the initiation of baptism itself was to have a supernatural effect in purifying the new Christians from the influence of demons, and then by default, the power of magic and the possible manipulations associated with them. So part of this assurance was found upon the ritual of exorcism that took place during the baptism ritual itself, spiritually sealing the initiate from any demonic power, which, of course, another early church father, Ignatius of Antioch, asserted acted as the medicine for immortality. In this sense, if a Christian was baptized, the ritual actually severed any magical cords with demons or any powers outside of God through Christ, making such ritual actions actually futile. In theory, then, a baptized Christian could not practice magic even if he wanted to, or it would be ineffective if he did. Of course, others could work the magic for him or could be placed upon him in the form of an amulet. But then, of course, so you see where we're going with this. So some people are saying, well, therefore, some early Christians are thinking, we're doing these actions and it happened. So since we can't do magic or doing evil deeds, then therefore it must be a miracle by default. You see how they kind of worm their way through that one. Is that good? So, hey, I'm a Christian, I'm baptized, so I can't do magic. So whatever ritual activity I did, it must be a miracle, even though I did the same incantations as the magician did. But maybe it won't work at all, then it must have been magic, and oh well. So another story, the most curious story concerning magic, also entered popular consciousness. This is a whole other theory. This is I love talking about this. I'm sorry. This is really interesting. It's just really intriguing what people believe and how they understand even magic in this context. Ignatius of Antioch. By the way, both Justin Martyr and Ignatius of Antioch are considered apostolic church fathers. They are understood by the Catholic Church as being orthodox in every way. So if you're Catholic, I'm reading here these beliefs. So what is Ignatius? He talks about this. He said that when Jesus was born, all the powers of magic were broken so that they were no longer a legitimate supernatural influence in the world. So his belief is Jesus was born, so there's no such thing as magic. It doesn't exist. He says, now the virginity of Mary and her giving birth were hidden from the rulers of this age, as was also the death of our Lord. 3 mysteries to be loudly proclaimed, yet were accomplished in the silence of God. How then were they revealed to the ages? A star shone forth in heaven, brighter than all the stars. Its light was indescribable, and its strangeness caused amazement. All the rest of the constellations, together with the sun and the moon, formed a chorus around the star, yet the star itself outshone them all, and there was perplexity about the origin of the strange phenomena that was unlike the others. Consequently, all magic and every kind of spell was dissolved. The ignorance so characteristic of wickedness vanished, and the ancient kingdom was abolished. When God appeared in human form to bring the newness of eternal life, and what has been prepared by God began to take an effect. As a result, all things were thrown in ferment because the abolition of death was being carried out. So you want a primary source? There we go. I read to you directly in context. In this scenario, no one, not even pagans, could perform effective magic. For when Jesus was born, the magical world ceased to exist. All magic then was diffused. So I guess if anything is happening, it must be good magic, right? It must be good, non-bad magic. So, well, then we're going on. So Irenaeus, another church father, the 2nd century, condemns the magic of Simon Magus, as we discussed, but also a certain Gnostic by the name of Marcus, who formed a sect that was mostly made of women, and he used magic and various love spells to seduce them to sleep with him. Okay, this is considered an early Christian heretic, I guess. As for his prophecies, Marcus used what's called a perhedros, which is a companion demon who worked through him. Now, once again, the perhedros was perceived by many outside of Christianity as being involved with John the Baptist, Jesus, Paul. Are you guys getting this? This demon companion. So there you have that. Well, Irenaeus claims that the rival Christian sects do produce miracles. He asserted that they do not act either through the power of God or a connection with the truth, but do so to lead people astray. Now, I want to stop there for a second. It's like, wait a second. Irenaeus, you're not helping us out. You're saying that he's doing some kind of miracles, but they're not from God? Then would they not be? Okay, anyway, we could go there, but you can see where things are getting muddled. Even the church fathers are not sure what they are doing. Tertullian connected heretical groups with leaders who practice magic, but magic as defined as darker magic or evil deeds, usually combined with accusations of sexual promiscuity. In other words, trying to fool women via magic to sleep with them. So you're going to start seeing this a lot. You're going to see that magic is understood as bad magic, and bad magic is used for manipulation and specifically used to seduce people. Now, as much as magic was discounted from the official status quo of the church, common Christians often still believed they could practice the magical acts even after baptism. And so for them, the age of magic did not end with the advent of the age of Christ. So we get to the Council of Elvira. This convened in the year 306 CE. It declared in Canon 6, if someone kills another by sorcery or magic, that person shall not receive communion, even at the time of death, for this action is a form of idolatry. Now, I want to pause here. Well, if someone kills another using magic, well, that seems just bad in general. Killing somebody, right? Yeah, okay. Pretty extreme. Here, magic was directly connected with idolatry. To make the magic work, one had to cast upon forces that were not directly of God, sometimes praising them and other times appeasing or bartering with them. While at times these spirits were designated as angels of God, the stigma would remain. So the idea is evidently don't use magic to kill people. But it didn't go into don't do magic at all. I mean, you would think that the Council of Elvira would say, don't do any magic. Does it do that? No, just says don't use it to kill people. Okay. As for Constantine the Great, all right. Although he did issue some laws that restricted traditional religion, mandated an act against magical practices in 318, and enforcing regulations against divination starting in 319 to 320. On closer inspection, it turns out that with the first act that Constantine made in 318, forbade against what was labeled as bad actions or bad magic that was directed against people's lives, and permitted what could be understood as good magic meant to secure the crops and the good health of the emperor. So he's saying, don't do bad magic. Good magic, of course, but it's not magic, right? As for the law against divination, they were only applied to practice in private settings. Against this was to ensure safety of the state. So it had to be public, the divination, right? So, and by the way, Roman emperors have been making these laws for a long time. Pagan emperors have been making these laws against divination, because then you can foresee in secret, oh, it looks like this emperor is going to die soon. See how that works. Constantine proves to be the exemplar illustration of the kind of confusion that so many experience between magic and miracle. For while he asserted that either through a dream or a vision, he saw the sign of the cross, the Hiero, with the declaration, with this sign conquer, the emperor used this sign. He placed the image upon his soldiers, standards, and maybe shields, and used it in much the same way as a magical amulet, with the perception that this Christian God's power would work through them to be able to defeat his rival Maxentius. The fact that his enemy was defeated, thrown into the Tiber River, validated his belief. From then on out, Constantine revered the symbol of the cross, with his mother Helena supposedly discovering the piece of the true cross during the pilgrimage to the Holy Land. but he writes very little about the theology of the cross. For when he does discuss this sign, it is as a power symbol treated in the same way as a pagan power symbol. Sorry, he's, by the way, he's not baptized until his deathbed. As for the cult of saints, again, the division between miracle and magic was quite muddled. For while church doctrine permitted the idea that God may work through the agency of these relics to effect cures, many commoners and even theologians viewed these bones as automatically imbued with the power of healing within their very materiality, as they were mystically transported between the realm of heaven and earth. This belief gave these relics immediately access to this divine power. Of course, once someone believed that an object automatically performed for whoever would use it, and further still that any person could access this power, we have entered into a most definite magical rather than miraculous worldview. The Cappadocian Basil the Great also addresses magical ideas. He talks about the idea of the evil eye, even though he says that the evil eye in and of itself is ineffective. If the person who is envious falls to a demon, the demon can work through that person's eyes to give that other person that they're jealous of, various ailments and make them sick. So he's kind of saying with the evil eye, no, but yes. So there you have it. So we move on to, what about Christian spells to heal and protect oneself? Many Christians believe they could. Now, the Council of Laodicea, which met between 363 to 364 CE, proclaimed against clerics using such magic for protection and to heal people. Here it is. Neither higher or lower clergy, maybe magicians, conjurers, mathematicians, astrologers, not make amulets. Okay. Well, that seems to be it, right? No, because it only specifies clerics. What about common people? It doesn't. Once again, these official Christian councils, I don't know what's going on. They don't care. Clerics don't do it. What about the common people? Not a word. And so it keeps going on, right? It keeps going on. So then there was a story of Priscillian. He's the bishop of Avia. He was condemned in 385 CE for practicing magic. Now listen, but this magic was defined as a maleficium, which means dark magic, bad magic, and was connected to nocturnal gatherings with shameful women, sexual promiscuity, as well as praying naked. The imperial court determined that the accused was doing dangerous magic, and that was why he was condemned. So not really against magic per se, but how it's bad magic. Oh my goodness. How about the Eunomians? The Eunomians were accused of practicing harmful magic in 398 CE by an imperial court, and as orchestrated by Eutropius, specifically sorcery. But again, the real problem was that they were viewed as political rivals. So I know. So throughout the 4th century, the church really, it says clerics, no, don't do it, and don't kill anybody in general. That's it. For the whole 4th century. So okay. What about the 4th century church father John Chrysostom going into the 5th century? He lived in Antioch, and many Christians in Antioch, where he lived for a while, believed Jewish charms and incantations and amulets could heal them. John himself admits that the Jewish magic actually appeared to work, but his whole thing is he told the Christians of his city that it was better for them and their souls to refuse the magical remedies, even if they were proven to be effective. And he said instead, he mentioned how the sign of the cross performed was to be used instead. And I'm thinking to myself, well, okay, right. So in a sense, he's saying, don't use that, but use the cross, and referring to the cross in a sense as a talisman. So you can see where the confusion lies, right? Now, moving right along here, Augustine, however, he viewed he basically, according to Augustine, many Christians view the martyrs, he says, as magicians, while the relics were seen as magical. But he said that all the arrangements made by men for the making and worshiping of idols are superstitious, pertaining as they do either to the worship of what is created or some part of it as God, or to consultations and arrangements about signs and leagues of devils, such, for example, are as employed in the magical arts, in which the poets are accustomed not such to teach or to celebrate. I'm sorry about his wordiness. Basically is he's starting to say, you don't do it. That's Augustine. Whew. Now, the First Council of Rome in 492. Wait, we're already in 492? This in 492, it took till 492. This is the very first church council to directly address Christians wearing magical talisman and making such practices forbidden, stating they are not inscribed by angels as they pretend, but those of demons. So that's the 492. That's quite a long ways from the first, second, third, and fourth centuries. This is the end of the 5th century. The Council of Trullo is where it appears next. This is in 691 or 692. It condemned the furnishing of amulets in Canon 61, but many scholars refer to amulets used for divination rather than amulets for protection, because everybody's using that. In fact, Christian amulets became really popular during this period of time, so most likely not. I mean, everybody's wearing them. I shouldn't say everybody, but a large portion of the population are wearing these talisman. And there was actually a center for talisman making. Palestine was the main center for the making of amulets in the 5th century into the 6th century. In fact, quite a few of these magical trinkets were carved by trained gem cutters working in various soft stones. Each of these amulets were pierced through the top and were to be hung around the neck by the purchaser. As for themes, one of the most popular was that of the raising of Lazarus from the dead by Jesus, both of who were typically represented on the image, while the reverse side contained a spell, often written in Greek, but sometimes in a pseudo language intended for health and protection. The idea was that if Jesus can raise Lazarus from the dead, he can certainly protect the wearer of the amulet. Another theme was the sacrifice of Isaac, again, when all hope was lost, hearkening to the potential loss of Abraham's son. This disaster was averted in the end. Hence, this was an amulet promoting hope and possibly direct divine intervention. A few of the sacrifice of Isaac amulets have appeared to be Hebrew on the backside, but it really is a bunch of nonsense. It's just Hebrew-like. Now, of course, you're going to see this also with Daniel slaying the dragon of Babylon. I mean, so yeah. So in the Council of Trullo, they're not going to go, don't use amulets or talisman when it comes to divination, but the others, people, this is part of popular religion at this time. So we're going to talk about papyri. I know we have a little bit more, we don't have a lot more time, but I want to keep going. I want you to hear from actual magical papyri, real ones. So, and then I have something very special to share with you at the end of the talk. So, all right. So here we go. I do have Magick with me. Okay, so here we go. The earliest extant Christian magical papyri dates from the 2nd century, actual piece that we have. It was used to cure a headache, declaring, "Turn away, O Jesus, the grim-faced one, and on behalf of your maidservant, her headache to the glory of your name, Yel Adonai Sabaoth, Ariel, Gabriel. So the very first magical papyri was to cure a headache. Many of these spells early on are simply lists of biblical quotations intended to heal somebody. For example, Berlin 9096, which basically cites the introduction of all four gospels as part of this spell. So there you have it. A spell from going on from the 4th or 5th century invokes Christ to protect one from illness and ill treatment. It almost has a creed-like sensibility. I mean, I'll read it. So if you want to hear it, I invoke you, God of heaven and God of the earth and God of the saints, through your blood, the fullness of the Aeon who comes to us, who has come to the world and has broken the claw of Charon, who has come through Gabriel in the womb of the Virgin Mary, who was born in Bethlehem and raised in Nazareth, who was crucified. For this reason, the curtain of the temple was torn by itself, who after rising from the dead showed himself in the grave on the 3rd day of his death, showed himself in Galilee and ascended to the height of heaven, and has myriads of angels on his left, as well as myriads of angels on his right, calling out 3 times one voice, holy is the King of the Aeon, so that the heavens are full of his divinity, who goes on his way with the wings of the winds. Come, O mercy, God of the Aeon. And it goes on, so it sounds very much like a creed. And yet it was intended for what? The sovereigns and the powers and the world rulers of darkness, whether an unclean spirit or demon fallen at the hours of midday, or mild fever or a shivering fever, or ailment from powers of peoples of the adversary. Yes, it was intended to heal a person from a fever. Again, it is a healing spell, but it sounds like a creed. Now, in contrast to this amulet, Amsterdam 173, it of course talks about the idea that to heal and protect a certain Magos, it says as follows, "Oh, by Jesus Christ, heal Magos, whom," we lost part, "bore of every disease and pain of the head and the temples and the fever and shivering fever." The sign of the cross surrounds these words, indicating the use of this image in a magical and a protective sense. So we're going to see one in a few moments. In Oxyrhynchus 924, a woman by the name of Aria is given an amulet to protect her also from a fever. It's interesting. A lot of people are using these amulets to cure a fever. What's interesting with this one is that it goes on with the bottom of the amulet having 6 or 7 Greek vowels with the epsilon missing, along with the alpha and the omega. The most interesting part is that the Trinity is Father and Son and Mother, with the Holy Spirit as the divine mother. The name Abraxas also appears. The spell goes as follows: truly guard and protect Aria from the one-day chill and from the daily chill and from the nightly chill and from the mild fever of the top of the head. There's a lot of people having fevers there, right? So according to the magical papyri from the 4th century, there is also a spell to drive out a demon. It says, here we go. So you want to hear how to drive out a demon? So here is the Christian spell to do so. It says, starts off, excellent spell for driving out demons. So there's like a recommendation here. Formula to be spoken over the head. Okay. So it says, place all the branches before him and stand behind him, saying, greetings, God of Abraham, greetings, God of Isaac, greetings, God of Jacob, Jesus the upright, the Holy Spirit, the Son of the Father, who is below the 7. So the 7, this is intended to be the 7 planetary spheres. Who is within the 7? Bring Yao Sabaoth, may your power issued forth from, name a person, until you drive away this unclean spirit, Satan, who is in him. I adjure you, demon, whoever you are, by this God, Saborabaleth, Sobarabaleth, Sobarabaleth, Sobarabalai. Come out, demon, whoever you are, and stay away from the name of the person. Hurry, hurry, now. Come out, demon, since I bind you with unbreakable, adamant fetters, and yeah, and of course goes on and on. So there's also, so you see, they're used for different purposes. There's an odd spell from the 4th or 5th century, which is actually a curse, with Mary putting a curse upon Martha. I don't know why. 2 important women in the Bible who are considered friends. These are like Christians cursing somebody. So the curse follows. It says, Maria, Michael, Gabriel, Solel, you must bring her away by the method of an ulcerous tumor. Yikes. Arise in your anger, bring her down to a painful end, to put aside marriage and send forth punishment. She pouring forth worms. That is Martha. My Lord Jesus Christ, you must bring her down to an end. Yea, Jesus Christ, you must dissipate her hope so that no one desires to assist her. Well, this is awful. This is really bad curse. And it's done in the name of Christianity. So it's wow, So, okay, here's another one. We'll just read a few more. I do have a main attraction coming. One spell was to be used to free someone from prison. So it gives you a little drawing you're supposed to draw. And then on a new jar, you throw it to him and it will force him out in the street. There's an early Christian spell to create an earthquake. I'm not going to read this whole spell because otherwise it'll be like, I'll just read part of it. Yeah, so somebody wants to create an earthquake. I'm kind of thinking, doesn't this seem like bad magic to you? I don't know. I'm just saying, So it says, I praise you and I glorify you and I invoke you today, God, who is alive forever and ever, who is coming upon the clouds of heaven for the sake of the whole human race. Yah Sabaoth Adonai Eloi, I am Mary, and then of course he says other words. I'm skipping intentionally. I am mother of the life of the whole world, right? Yeah. Ali says, yeah, we live in California. We shouldn't read the whole thing. It talks about splitting rocks, darkness, and so forth. But yeah, that one was translated by my friend Marvin Meyer. But yeah, let's not read that one. Oh, one Christian spell is for the protection from reptiles. So it's a prayer. When you recite it, no reptile can bite you. It says, oh, Jesus, I am in Mary. Oh, John, I am in Elizabeth. The Lord Jesus said, let nothing at all me, and this is the name, on this day and this night, it is the mouth of the Lord Sabaoth that said this, let no reptile bite me, but let all reptiles upon the earth become stone in my presence. Let all those upon the earth become stone or iron in my presence. For it is the mouth of the Lord Sabaoth that said this, and his words of the Lord are true. It is done. Okay. So, well, hey, so yeah, so, but reptiles kind of freeze it as it is. So I don't know. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. So, and I keep having some more fun. I want to just a few more. I got to read. Okay. Another spell is it's an elaborate Christian recipe, a book, wards against evil in general, through a series of rituals. I like this. I mean, and it's interesting. I don't like it. I don't do it. But for the person is first to draw 4 angels in front of a curtain, of the Father. And it says, while you are wearing a wreath of roses with a branch of myrtle in your hand and with gum aromatic in your mouth. Next, you offer frankincense, storix, and then you have a nest. And this is kind of sad. You slay 6 doves. Follow this by offering cinnamon and rose oil. Burn this with charcoal, with white wood and olive wood. After all this, the person may begin saying the spell. And of course, I invoke you today, the one who governs heavens to the earth, from earth to heaven, the great only begotten God. Listen to me today. And it goes on and on with the spell for general protection. So You do have medicine. Oh, here's a Christian spell. I won't read it, but it's for helping people who have difficulty urinating. So that's good. I don't want anybody having to go to the bathroom during this talk, so I'll just keep on going. There is an amulet addressed to the Virgin Mary, refers to the feminine principle as the first cause, and talking about the curing eye elements. There is a spell against violent attacks that appeal directly to Jesus. Weapons standing by, and you, Lord of Lords, you are the one from whom all healing comes. It sounds like just a typical prayer, but there are rituals and spells that accompany it. Another spell from the London Oriental manuscript provides a very long spell to protect a person from demons that has a very Gnostic character. It's by the way, it's 5987. If you're interested about that, very much a Gnostic one. It goes on forever. You have also one from the 6th century discovered that's in the John Rylands library. It's the earliest surviving document to use the Christian Eucharistic liturgy, specifically the Last Supper, as a protective charm. So now we're moving into another topic, which we won't go deeply into it. I'll just bring it up briefly, and that is, the Lord's Supper is looked at as magical and will be used by magicians or these Christian magicians. So interestingly enough, so now I want to read it. It's short. Okay. It says, "Hear you all who rules over the earth, know you nations and peoples that Christ is our Lord, for he spoke and they came into being. He commanded and they were created. He put everything under our feet and delivered us from the wish of our enemies. Our God prepared a sacred table in the desert for the people and gave manna of the new covenant to eat, the Lord's immortal body and the blood of Christ poured for us in remission of sins." And then what happens is, the idea is that what they will do is that you, through the Eucharist, through the energy, through that power, we talked about that power, can use that power, can use that energy in and of itself through the elements to do magical workings. And so this will go in late antiquity into, of course, medieval magic. So you can, it does make sense because, it is, the Eucharist is a great mystery. It is magical, and now it's being used for magical spells, right? Oh, here's one spell from the 6th or 7th century. It was intended to be uttered while holding a bone as it touches a corpse in order to receive power from it. What? Yeah. So you take a bone. I have a bone to pick with you, right? Wow, yeah. You take a bone and you touch a corpse, and it's believed that then you say, Samakari of Christ, I call upon Lord Sabaoth Adonai Euspum, O child with flowing hair, I place an oath upon you, O dead bone, in order that you bring forth blood from this corpse, whose true name this is, now, at once. Ow, and you got the power bone. So there you have it. So, all right. So another spell. Oh, this spell, I want to read this one. It's a Christian spell from the 6th century. It's a spell for a man to attract a male lover. It says, Yahweh Sabaoth, I adjure you by the power and your amulets and the places where you dwell and your names, that just as I take you out, you at the door and the pathway of Phalos, son of Maur, so also you must take his heart and his mind. You must dominate his entire body. When he tries to stand, you must not allow him to stand. When he tries to sit, you must not allow him to sit. When he tries to sleep, you must not allow him to sleep. He must seek me from town to town, from city to city, from field to field, from region to region, until he comes to me and subjects himself under my feet. Papolos of Noe, while his hand is full of all goodness, until I satisfy with him the desire of my heart and the demand of my soul with pleasant desire and love unending right now, at once, do my work. So this is a Christian spell that is connected to somebody who is a same-sex attraction. So, I mean, you have all kinds of spells. Is this interesting? Yeah, right. So I'll see a few more, and I'll show you what I'm going to show you. Well, of course, you have, of course, ones that are one that's basically, this is a curious one. It invokes through the power of God's tattoos. So God has tattoos. My mother is Mary. This is Rylands 103. My mother is Mary, the breast from which our Lord Jesus Christ drank. In the name of the seal that is traced upon the heart of Mary the Virgin, in the name of the 7 holy vows which are tattooed on the chest of the Father Almighty, basically, Greek verbs together. Vowels together. In the name of him who said, I and my Father are one, that is Jesus Christ, in the name, and it goes on. So basically, the 7 vowels are there. I hope that's interesting. There is, of course, there's even a 7th century Christian spell for a good singing voice. For a good singing voice. The top, if you want to have a good singing voice, the top of this spell has a drawing of a winged angel blowing a trumpet named as Harmozo, who will be invoked in the spell as the great ruler. Around the angel is the text for the preparation of a chalice to be used in the ritual, including white dove's blood, calamus extract, musk, white reed. And it says, write these signs at the base of a pristine chalice and hang it on your neck. White honey, white wine, Tobe water, offer greetings. This is the preparation of the chalice. It says a black bowl, face of the Father, then begins the spell. Greetings, tabernacle of the Father and the Son and the Spirit, and those who dwell in it. Greetings to the 7 archangels who surround the glory of the Father. Greetings, principalities and authorities and forces on high. It greets everybody. It greets and greets and greets. And then it says, you of the sweet voice, so that you will come to me today, I, name, child of name, and stand upon this chalice that is placed before me, and fill it for me with sweet, pleasing sound, rising, falling, turning around like a filled with every sweet melody, drawing like a wind, without hoarseness, without shortness of breath, with spittle, yea, and it goes on. So yeah, for a okay, so there's a lot of these. I mean, there's a whole lot. Headless powers but I'm gonna go ahead. I actually have literally like 15 more pages of this, but I will close and then I'll show you my surprise. I will close, and I do have a prize. There is, here's one. An erotic spell from the 9th century Christian one is used by a man to attract a woman via a piece of fruit. It says, I adjure you by your names and your powers and your amulets and the glorious places where you dwell, that you come down upon these pieces of fruit that are in my right hand. I, name, when she eats of them, you may give her desire for me, and she may desire me with an endless desire, and come to me in places where I am, and I may lay my breast upon her and satisfy all my desire with her, and she may satisfy all my desire right now, at once. There we go. There's another love spell that binds the woman to love the man via invoking Gabriel to disturb her until she comes to him, which is not very pleasant. But, I told you that there is also ones that attract the same sex. We have quite a few of those as well. I just found another one from the 9th century. So there you have it. Oh, this is an awful one. I'm not going to read it. It's a late 10th century curse was forced against both a woman's face and her work. This is a Christian one, supposed Christian one, in order to make curse a woman's face to make them look unattractive. Oh, here's one that many of you will appreciate. Here's a curse to leave a man impotent while protecting women from his sexual advances. There we go. This is from Chicago Oriental Institute 13767. I will not read everything because, I'll just allude to things. Oh, binding of the sky, binding of the earth, binding of the air, binding of the firmament, binding of the Pleiades, binding of the sun, binding of the moon, binding of the birds, binding of the ring of the Father, binding with that which Jesus Christ was upon the wood of the cross, binding of the 7 words which Elisus spoke over the heads of the holy ones, whose names are these: Sucho, Karasis, Chazis, Ethos, Ashna, Shara, Shara. May that binding be upon the male organ of Pharos and his flesh. May you dry it up like wood, and make it like a rag upon the manure pile. His male member must not be firm. It must not have an uprightness. It must not release. I'm giving the nice words. It must not have intercourse with Taliesin, daughter of Camor, or any other woman, whether wild or domesticated. There's wild or domesticated. Anyway, women. Who wants to be a wild woman? Who wants to be a domesticated woman? Until I myself call out, but may it dry up the male organ of Pharos, son of Kerpeos. He must not have intercourse with Taliesin, daughter of Camor, he being like a corpse lying upon a tomb. Pharaoh's son of Kerpeos must not have intercourse with Talon, daughter of Camor. Yeah, once at once. So you have quite a bit. So where do we go from here? These magical practices continue to happen. In fact, what I'm going to do, I'm not sure if Margie's able to do it. I'm going to show something, but just in case it doesn't work, I'm going to send her some pictures. So I'm going to show you something. But I'm not sure if she'll be able to share it or not.
Okay, are you sending them to my messenger?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
So, but don't show them yet. You just get prepared. So I have something that I want to show you that is of importance. I mentioned the fact that Christians continue to do magical works. I have here in my hands a magic talisman that is Christian. This is understood as a genuine Roman Catholic talisman. It's from 1766. It is real. It was used for magic, including the healing and protection of various individuals. You see here, it arrives in the form of a small scroll. And when it is unrolled, it measures to 5 feet in length. I'll show you a little bit, then I'll show you pictures. It looks much like a cigar on the exterior, showing some wear. The rest is in perfect condition. Typically, the talisman was carried upon the individual for their health as well as their protection. There is at the center of the scroll a magical configuration. But according to my research, these symbols or characters were only intended for the educated. Now, the scroll features the birth narrative of Jesus, with a focus also on Joseph and Mary, and the apocryphal story of the parents of Mary, Joachim and Anna, with all their names used in the magical section of the talisman. surrounded by a protective barrier. The story of Joachim and Anna has similarities with the story of the birth of Samuel in the Old Testament and John the Baptist in the New Testament, where the fear of the mother was that she would be childless. With Joachim, he was distraught and withdrew to the desert for 40 days and then was informed by angels that his wife was indeed pregnant. Immediately, he returned to Jerusalem full of joy and embraced his wife before the Golden Gate to tell her the good news. The first evidence, of course, of the story arrives in the 2nd century. Now, the story would be read out loud. So a person would read the story out loud by the individual holding the talisman. Believe in the miracle that happened with Joachim and Anna would happen to them, whether by becoming pregnant or in other ways, as well as being used for protection and healing, as I had already mentioned. Now, the feast of Joachim and Anna was not added to the Roman calendar until 1581, and the talisman goes to great lengths to demonstrate its legitimacy via the papacy, specifically counting from 1655. The authority of Pope Clement VIII, who's Pope from 1592 to 1605, is also appealed to. The registry is officiated by an M.A. Sibin from Antwerp on July of 1766. This is where it's from. So as much as this was a talisman, the text is claiming official Catholic Church approval. Dutch Protestants, of course, disapproved of this practice, and I found the academic references were well aware of this sentiment to bolster their claims of primary legitimacy. Now, the only academic sources are also in Dutch for this, and while I can read German and Latin, I was not really trained in Dutch. Fortunately, I grew up with a father who is Dutch and spoke Dutch, and with that background, I dove into the text with a dictionary, and with my knowledge of German syntax being similar, I was able to read it as well as the Dutch academic perspectives. But it took all day. Still, this is fun research. It took me. So here it is. So I'll show you a little bit so you see it's the same one. And now, Margie, are you ready to show the pictures? So there is the magical part. You can see, obviously, you got various signs there, and it's surrounded by a magical barrier. You'll see the cross there. Okay, go to the next one. There's what you just saw. See the the scroll showing quite a bit of age. It is a talisman. It is to be worn upon the body. Okay, next one. This is what you just saw. And you can see right there the reference to 1655. And you see the Pope Clemens right there, right? The 8th right there on there, claiming legitimacy. This is Christian magic, but early modern Christian magic. Next one. There's the official 1766. So this is claiming papal authority. Okay, next one. And again, I think I just showed you the same one again. Sorry, next one. This is one picture of two of how long it is, and one more. And this is the second picture. So it unrolls to be that far. Oh, and I'm giving you some reading suggestions if you're interested along with it. Thank you so much, Margie. And so with that conclusion of early modern Christian magic in the form of a real talisman, right, held in my own hands, I will continue to tell you that yes, when it comes to the realm between miracle and magic, it's all about the point of view of the observer. And I hope I was able to convey that to you, and you can understand also why the topic of early Christian magic is a complicated one, even when it comes to the idea of magic. It is so much about semantics. Thank you so much. And I'm done. Okay. How are we doing? Was that fun seeing a real one?
I think so.
No. I figure, seeing something, the real thing is kind of helpful, right? Just slightly. So the original. So anyway. Okay. So obviously that's it's exhausting. Yes, Leb.
Hi, I mean, I have so many questions and I really appreciated the presentation. I guess just since it's in the most immediate forefront of my ADHD brain, I'll ask the one that's on the surface is recognizing that this is like a palpable, I mean, like the Vatican has authenticated, like this is actually a real thing and it's, you said pre-modern.
Early modern.
Early modern.
That's
It's just like,
1700s.
it's just I'm curious as to, first of all, I've always wanted to like have access to the Vatican libraries for things like this, or their archives for things like this. I just find it fascinating. But also the fact that it's sort of how these, if you bring up this history or such artifacts or even question current practices, there's a lot of either disbelief or discrediting, or no, that's not Christian, that's not Catholic, that's not this or that. And it very clearly obviously is. And it's exciting also to be like, well, for people who are who have some sort of identification of a faith, of what it would be like to bring this back. And it just, that isn't necessarily fully the case. And I'm curious as to how maybe in your training and education, religions in general, and your particular education, and then particularly in this context of why there's such a denial of this history and a refusal to kind of look at and accept the reality of these magical practices up till early modern times, especially with Vatican. I mean, it's signed and all that, it's just an example of the artifact you offered. So yeah, I'd be interested in your thoughts on this. Thank you.
It's Vatican I, Vatican II. So there's revisionism in both of those councils.
Yeah.
You also had changes, understandably, with the Council of Trent that went on forever in the 1500s. So you're going to have the Council of Trent trying to undo these practices through a more modern lens. And so they're going to have, but your clergymen, your parish priest in the middle of nowhere, they're still going to be continuing to practice these ideas, which I think is interesting because here's the 1700s, right? Shouldn't this have stopped, using papal authority for these kinds of things? Or are they using papal authority without actually asking permission? It's like, oh, it's okay, wink, wink, but doubtful because it's done in the name of a bishop. So you still have this problem. And I want to answer this question so many different ways. So why do we deny this? I guess that's the question today. Why do we pretend this does not happen?
Yeah, that it didn't happen, then it doesn't happen, and then it can't ever happen.
I think going back all the way to the actual text of the New Testament, when it comes to even understanding what the Hebrew words mean and what the Greek words mean, is dependent upon the culture of understanding those words as it moves through time. So there was a time when the reading of the New Testament for some audiences, not all, or some individuals, lent support for making these connections with popular rituals and actions perceived as magic, and so endorsing it. But as time goes on, people change, language changes, cultures change. And so there's a time where the Greek, the earlier Hebrew, can be read in or more exclusively to another way, because theologians, they like to have, and church leaders, they like to have exclusive use when it comes to interpretation. They want
Yeah.
to have the power of interpretation. And so they have to work harder. It's maybe one of the reasons why the church did not want people to read the Bible in the original language, right? Because
Right.
having access to that may lead to other understandings. Now, obviously that didn't work. I mean, Martin Luther, but we know, of course, that with Martin Luther, he came up with his German translation, and Protestants are all one today.
Yeah. Yeah.
You get my point. You're like, wait a second.
Yeah.
No, how many Protestants reading those particular words in different ways according to their background, their traditions, their cultures? Yeah, it's so with the Catholic Church, it's like, okay, Vatican, the Council of Trent, Vatican I, Vatican II. We got to narrow these definitions as much as we possibly can for our own control, because magic works outside the church.
Yeah. Yeah.
It works outside of their authority. And there's that fear also of losing power. Hey, I can, you read earlier, hey, I don't, I have the power of the Eucharist in my own hands, by using this magical amulet, I can use that power for myself to heal, as opposed to going to the church or going to a priest or going to somebody to pray for you. They don't want people doing it yourself. There's no do-it-yourself kind of kit ideas that are supposed to be related to anybody who's outside the authority of the clergy. It needs to go through those individuals, and so the church is holding on to that power. This idea that some kind of power of God works automatically is like, oh no, that could that's a runaway train. We gotta reel it in. However, something like this could be a co-opt, right? This could be like, look, you're using a talisman. It's on you. It's going to make you pregnant. You wear it. But the church has the authority, so it's okay. You can use this kind of good magic, and we'll call it a talisman. We'll call it another word, even though it does the very thing that we understood as the earlier definition of magic or acts of ritual power. But we're not going to, we change the words so it's passable. Is this helpful?
Yes. Yes. Very much so.
So, yeah. So, but then it gets to the point, Vatican I, and moving on, you can't use it at all. But they do use it all the time. The cross is used constantly as a talisman, believed to automatically do things. And you say certain words and certain actions. Now, you'll ask the priest, they'll say, no way. You'll ask the parishioner, they're going, we think so. It depends on the parishioner. Because again, we're dealing with perception. We're dealing with the fact that people go through various trainings and whatever church catechisms, whatever churches they're part of. But the point is that you're not going to remember it all. and the reality is that, if you're not theologically trained, you're not going to understand these notions. So this, to most people, and it's very worn, it gives evidence that this was used. This is not something that wasn't used by somebody, and it's carefully wrapped too. So they'll see it as magic, or you'll say the word miracle. Sure, whatever it does, it automatically works. Automatically. It automatically is infused with power, maybe infused with the power of God, but it works automatically for anybody. That's what this says. It works for anybody. So could this work for a person who's not a Christian? Apparently so.
Unbaptized.
Unbaptized. It still works. Okay. Well, that doesn't quite do well when it comes to Christian theology either. So Although then again, Jesus is said to cure anybody, but can we extend that to a piece of material?
Mm.
Maybe we can't. And see, I'm going to counter, maybe we do believe that energy and power is infused in actual material objects. If you come from a pagan worldview, right? If you come from many other world religions, this is okay, right? And you're thinking, my next sentence is going to be, so it's not okay with Christianity. No, I'm not going to say that, because it was okay with Christianity. We have too much evidence to show it was. What is Jesus doing with the saliva? What going on with Peter's shadow? What's going on with the handkerchiefs of Paul? How are early Christians to interpret this? I think we're really harsh on people. If they're reading this, how else are they supposed to think without having a long, theological conversation about the nuances of it? They're going to think, well, it works, so I'll use it. And I think we come down a little too hard on common people when it comes to folk religions and beliefs, because, and I think we sometimes we give too much power to those people in authority, because how do they know what the original intent is for that particular scripture? Do they know? Were they there? Are they making it up as they go along? Maybe the common perception is more correct. Who are we to know? Who are we to decide? Or maybe we should just allow people to follow their heart and let them decide for themselves. Maybe we should do that. I don't know. I hope that helps, right? I like the following your heart kind of thing, maybe that's, and isn't that what Christianity was supposed to be about? Isn't that what Judaism was supposed to be about? Loving God, right? I don't know, just throwing it out there, right? Bringing it in perspective. Maybe people should agree more on the central precepts and just relax with the periphery. I don't know. I think fundamentalism is one of the greatest evils of today. So it has destroyed so many lives, and it is not following what Christianity is about, because in Christianity, that would be what Jesus talked about when it comes to Pharisees. They exactly fit that, the letter of the law. So I don't know. So even when it comes to Christian perspective, so I think this is an interesting talk, and it does open up these possible avenues of interpretation. Yeah. Any other questions? I'm sorry. Did I have you at amulet? It's like, yeah, as soon as he show the talisman, that was it. So, all right. Well, did you have any questions, Allie? I'm sorry, I saw questions. All right, so we covered it. All right. Oh, so much.
Thank you so much.
I can't repeat. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I was going so fast trying to get through the materials. I didn't see all the comments. Now I'm seeing them all. So, oh, Julian, I wonder if this amulet of Isaac being sacrificed was a picture I put in the chat at the start. It is similar. I remember. I was going to ask if it had a Hebrew on it, or perhaps Enochian script or angelic script. All three have similarities, but Hebrew is standardized and others could have just been made up. So often, these Christian magical amulets have made up Hebrew. They have no idea at all what these letters mean. They're not spelling anything. It's nonsense. And Jewish scholars will read this and go, what? But hey, they're faking it and it works. It again shows you that's oftentimes a Christian provenance. By the way, once again, when you look at this amulet, you're reminded of a story. And oftentimes people would tell that story, and whatever happened in that story is going to happen to you. Just like This amulet is about reading a story, and whatever happens to them is going to happen to you, i.e. the pregnancy bit. Does that make sense? So it does follow that story log, a kind of idea. So excellent question. So, and yeah, let's see here. John D was a position. Yeah. So nothing Enochian that I can find when it comes to Christian amulets, although early Christians did embrace Enoch in many different ways. In fact, just because we're having too much fun here, you know, the Epistle of Jude has a quote from Enoch in the New Testament. So, hey, there you have it right there. Go to town on that one. So there it is within the various worldview. So, oh, and I see this one about, oh, this is a great one. Let's see, the germ theory when it comes to demons. Yes. So what will happen is anything that makes you sick must be a demon. And so that's, they personify, identify anything that is illnesses of all different kinds. So basically, if you're a doctor, I guess you're a demon slayer too, right? And you got to do various things to ward away those demons. We actually have a doctor here in Sarah, medical doctor. Yeah. So yes, that makes sense. So they saw the world in a supernatural sense, not a scientific sense for the most part. And so, yeah, demons are connected with illnesses. So excellent. And once again, these magical papyri, they're all about medicine, right? That's their popular form of trying to get healed by appealing to some higher agency or agencies. Oh, good. Okay, I remember a previous talk where we discussed different variations of Jesus to God's secret name for the Temple of Atonement, stories such as writing in charcoal in his name. Yeah, so once again, this idea that Jesus is believed or perceived to taking power away from either the Egyptian temple or the Jewish temple. Again, we're back to the power word, the idea that there is some kind of word that can be uttered that is the key to access all this magical power. It's the keys to the kingdom. You say the word, and obviously Adonai, Salva, you know, you're going to have these, you're going to have Jewish words, or I'm using the Gnostic versions of it. But the point is that you'll use these words, or if you're pagan, Artemis, Artemisia, Visia, Kataske, you know, you'll say these words, or Isis, they'll use Isis as the power word. And then eventually, it's the idea that Jesus is now taking this power word of the Jews, and now he has it. And then his name itself then becomes a power word. See how that works? And then the Christians will use Jesus as the power word. Sorry. So, okay, I hope I got to a lot of the questions. I'm sorry if I didn't get to them all, but did I Ali, I was looking for them. Did I miss one of yours, or I did? Oh boy, should I just keep scrolling up here?
Yeah, she just posted one just right now. What vowels are in the string of Greek vowels?
Oh, okay. So you of course you have the alpha, right? You have the epsilon, you have the iota, you have the omicron, and you have the upsilon. So, is that the question you asked? Yeah, but they're all different configurations. Yeah, and the eta. Sorry, eta. Zeta, theta. But was a theta very good? I don't know. Ask Zeta. Is that good? Right. So there it is. Any other question?
I have a quick question. I'm sorry. I know everyone wants to go. A quick question. So do you see Jesus's name being used in the same text or spell or context as other, like Jesus Sophia, Jesus Hecate, Jesus, et cetera, et cetera? Do you see that used together, or is it always separate? Or Jesus Moses, or anything like that? Or is it always separate?
That's a great question. And the answer is you'll see the name Jesus with various Hebrew or pagan epithets, but never used as a double name, at least the ones I had on here. So Jesus will be used in context with pagan deities as listed as one of them. But typically you won't find Jesus won't be like Jesus dash, Hermes. But however, having said that, they will still identify Jesus with Dionysus. They'll still identify Jesus with Hermes. They'll still identify Jesus with Apollo. They'll still have that. But you typically don't see Jesus Apollo. Does that make sense? So the answer is yes, no. No, yes. That makes, although, you can go both ways. Is that helpful? Yeah. Any other questions?
Very helpful. Thank you. I've always wondered about that. Thank you.
Okay, well, this lecture has gone on longer than most, so I guess maybe we'll go ahead and close it up. Unless you have any more questions. We're gonna have a debate about, we're having a debate about demons and germs. So there we have it. So I guess I will say farewell, and may you be all protected